We at the American Federation for Children have been leading the charge to give families options when it comes to accessing a great K-12 education.
We know every child is unique. Every student can learn.
We can seize this moment together to bring healing and bridge divisions in our society and to truly change the course of America.
AFC is the only national organization structured to work in the three key areas that most powerfully advance K-12 educational choice: winning elections, passing laws, educating families, and empowering them with the freedom to choose the best K-12 education for their children. We want all families to have the freedom to choose the best K-12 education for their child so that they can finally say, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Greetings and welcome to the 2023 NCA webinar, School Choice Snapshot. My name is Bruce Hermie with the American Federation for Children, and I'm joined today by my colleagues, Ryan Cantrell, our National Director of Government Affairs, and Shaka Mitchell, a Senior Fellow at AFC, who's in charge of our ESA implementation. Shaka and Ryan, thanks for joining us today and lending your expertise to the conversation. So you saw the video at the beginning, but a little bit about the American Federation for Children. Our mission seeks to empower families, especially low-income families, with the freedom to choose the best K-12 education for their children. We believe in funding students and not systems because when the money follows the child, parents have the widest range of options to provide what their children need to help them excel at the highest level possible. We do this in a few ways. One, we work to establish, expand, and defend educational opportunities across the nation by engaging in elections work to elect school choice supporters and state legislators. We work in policy formation to create programs that work for students and families, and we do grassroots work to work with families, schools, and other community stakeholders to support the passage, expansion, and use of programs nationwide. At this time, I'm going to kick it over to Ryan to talk a little bit about some legislative successes that we've experienced in 2023 through the hard work of state legislators, parents, school leaders, and other key stakeholders. Ryan, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. I really am excited to get to tell everyone about the incredible success that 2023 has been to this point. So as of today, so the date we're recording is May 23rd, 10 states have passed legislation to create, expand, or improve school choice programs. This includes 5 states that allow for all or nearly all students to be eligible to participate in the program. That number by itself isn't all that impressive, but when you see the impact these programs will have on both available school choice funding and the number of students who will be able to participate, you begin to see how incredible the 2023 legislative session is shaping up to be. So to this point, and again, based solely on the programs that have passed to date, we're projecting that this year, approximately $1.2 billion new dollars will be given in scholarships to more than 160,000 new students. And because new programs like those in Iowa and Arkansas and South Carolina ramp up over a 3-year period, by the end of that third year, those numbers nearly double to $2.2 billion worth of scholarships and more than 300,000 students who will be newly enrolled in these programs. And again, all of these numbers are just estimates based on combination of state fiscal analysis and then historical enrollment in programs. But when you add these projections to the current number of school choice participants in states, again, just off of where we are today, we're projecting that during the 2025-26 school year, we're going to reach and surpass 1 million students enrolled in school choice programs across the country. This is going to result in nearly $6.5 billion in public funding being spent on scholarships. Again, this is just based on where we are today, so assuming nothing else happens. And that in and of itself is really exciting, but 2023 isn't over quite yet. There's still around a dozen states that have a good chance to expand school choice throughout the country. And you see here we have them color-coded by what we estimate to be the chances are of legislative passing. One of these states, Oklahoma, you see here highlighted in blue, actually came to an agreement this past week on another huge program that's going to result in roughly $250 million in scholarships for students in Oklahoma. We're expecting the governor to sign that bill this week. And so we'll be able to move them to the green column as well, which will take us to 11 states for 2023. But in addition to Oklahoma, there are 3 other states with really strong chances to pass legislation, including 2 states that are poised for monumental expansions, both in North Carolina and Ohio. And then a 3rd state, Nebraska, looks like we're finally going to be able to cross them off the list of states with no school choice, as they are also on the brink of passing their first program later this month. So again, 2023 is shaping up to be an epic year for school choice across the country. But when you look at what is going to be the biggest differentiator between 2023 and previous years, it's going to be the incredible breadth of these new programs. So at AFC, we talk about transforming what public education means. Our goal is to empower families, especially lower income families, with the purchasing power to choose the education that works best for their child, thereby shifting control to parents. There are now 5 states, Arizona, Iowa, Arkansas, Florida, and Indiana, that have passed uncapped programs that would allow for every child, or nearly every child, to have access to scholarship dollars. So theoretically, every parent in those states has the purchasing power to control their child's education. These states have basically stated that they will fund the demand for those programs. This is a huge shift from where we've been in the past, because as you can see from this chart, the total amount of funding for school choice programs was always limited by some type of cap, either a funding or enrollment cap. Historically, that meant we were counting in the millions when it came to new school choice funding. But over the last 2 years, we've had to use a much bigger calculator because the programs that we are passing have no upper cap. The upper cap is determined by how many students choose to participate. So now, will all K-12 students in those states participate in those programs? Probably not. But what it does do is fundamentally shift the balance of power in those states when it comes to education, away from the education establishment, away from the bureaucracy, and gives it to parents and families. And these broad-based programs are becoming more and more the norm rather than the exception. So with that in mind, I want to leave folks with a couple numbers that are indicative of the incredible growth of school choice over the last 2 years. In 2021, there was just under $3.5 billion worth of scholarships awarded across the country. Fast forward to today, this year there will be more than $37 billion in total school choice funding available to families across the country. And we're not done yet, Bruce. There's still more to come. We're excited to give updates later in the session.
Thanks, Ryan. So now we're going to kick it over to Shaka Mitchell, our senior fellow and head of our ESA task force, to talk a little bit about all these new ESA programs that have come online this year, and a little bit of history of school choice and how the movement continues to evolve. So Shaka, over to you.
Thanks, Bruce, and thanks, Ryan, for letting us know just what the legislative success across the country has meant, particularly with regards to education savings accounts. Education savings accounts, and I've labeled this portion sort of new considerations. ESAs, as I'll refer to them, really represent a whole dimensional shift in school choice or parent choice. You might think about the legacy school choice programs like this. You had money that was coming distributed by the government. It was going maybe into an account that the parent then distributed to a network of schools. And an analogy might be that you think about this as like a train on the tracks with a few known stops, right? That's how a voucher program or a tax credit scholarship program operated. Well, ESAs represent something fundamentally different. Now, instead of being sort of train on the tracks, this is more like a drone that can move up, down, left, right, and sideways. Now, money may come, and you can see it on the next slide, that money will come into a parent account and can go to fund any number of ways to really customize a child's education. And so I really want to talk about this, and we'll leave this slide up for a moment because I want to talk about what this means if you are a school leader in particular. One of the things that we have learned, and again, we are getting more data about how parents are using ESAs really on a weekly and monthly basis at this point, because we've got new programs that have already come online in states like Iowa, Arkansas will be starting as well. In just a few years, we'll have Utah. So with all these new programs, we're getting a lot more information about how parents are using them and really customizing their children's education. But one of the things that we would say to schools is that you should no longer assume that an entire ESA will be used solely for tuition. As you can see on this slide, now funds can be used for a range of educational opportunities. So one of the implications of this is that you may want to rethink your financial aid practices and policies, right? These are the sorts of things that parents will want to know about when they come to your school, because a parent no longer may spend 100% of, say, a voucher or a tax credit scholarship for school tuition. They may want to use a portion of it there and then a portion of it in other ways. So the next implication is that someone at the school level should really become versed in the education service providers that are available in the community. You also want to keep in mind that some of these providers may be online, right? And so some of these digital or virtual providers may have a fairly large footprint in the area. Now, we do have some information that we'll show you here from the state of Florida. Now, we don't have comprehensive data yet, but the information that we have suggests that parents' spending habits change over time. And so you can see in the left-hand table, you can see what spending in the ESA programs in the early years, 2014, 15, what that looked like as compared to spending in 2021, 22 school year. What I would really call your attention to is that top line of tuition. Well, tuition used to account for nearly 80% of expenditures, and now it accounts for closer to 50%, 55%, all in. Parents are using a much larger percentage of those dollars for curriculum and materials. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not spending or still attending private schools. It just means that they are learning that there are other creative ways to use these funds to really tailor their students' education. So here's where I think there's another opportunity for schools. Frankly, schools continue to be one of the most trusted institutions that we have in our country at a time when there is a lack of trust in many other governmental or public services, where there's a lack of trust even in some private companies and corporations. Schools do still represent a trusted relationship between an individual school and an individual family. So in the education savings account context, there's the opportunity to inform how parents are using some of these dollars to supplement the education that their child is receiving in school. So if you're a school leader, you might think about how do you leverage that relationship that you've got with a family, maybe even deepen the relationship that you have with a family, and speak into how they're spending those dollars. So might you steer them to certain supplemental pieces of curriculum or certain tutoring programs and practices that they might engage with over the summer, for instance, that they can use their education savings account dollars on. That's only, we think, going to deepen the relationship between schools and parents. And so it really is an exciting time now that we've got these programs coming online across the country. So I'll stop there and turn it back over to Bruce, who's really going to talk about some other practical ways that school leaders and faculties can engage with this issue. Thanks.
And we're going to move in, as Shaka said, to talking a little bit about school leaders and the role you all play in the work that takes place to pass, expand, and defend these programs nationwide. So, we have many school leaders that we're, able to look to, who've been part of this movement and been part of this work for years. And in that, we start with the common premise that basically there's a place in advocacy for everyone. Now, depending on your role in your school and some other kind of factors that kind of come into play from time to time, what you're allowed to do, what you can do, how you interact could be defined by a number of things. If you're a church school, it may depend on your pastor's outlook towards you getting involved in advocacy. It may be time as an issue that you want to be involved, but you're not sure how to get there. but there's a couple of key tenets in this that I want to make sure we're pointing to. One, school leaders and personnel know the needs of their families and how programs can operate the best to serve them. You're on the ground every day working with these families to utilize programs, to look for opportunities, to make sure that their kids are getting the education that they want. Second, your voice as a school leader and personnel is drastically underrepresented in the formation of educational policy. A lot of times bills being voted on don't have the benefit of a school leader's voice to say what will and will not work for families that they have in their schools and that they encounter on a daily basis. So what are some easy first steps you can take if you're a school leader who wants to get involved? First, you're doing it right now, and that's educate yourself. Educate yourself on the programs available in your states, how they work, how they interact with parents, and how they coincide with the school admissions process. That'll help you eliminate any barriers to parents participating and wanting to choose Catholic schools for their children. Second, learn who your legislative representative is. Even if you never reach out to this person in person, you may write letters, you may make phone calls, and interact with them in different ways that you know who they are, and you can point parents who are curious to them as well. Finally, and probably most importantly in the Catholic sector, talk with your Catholic conference director. Bishop sets the legislative agenda for all of our Catholic schools in his diocese, and therefore our Catholic conference directors work directly with Bishop to make those goals happen and make sure that we're following in his steps towards what he would like accomplished. So being able to learn from your Catholic conference director about school choice and other issues, what the kind of viewpoint is of the diocese and how they would like you to interact is key. And make sure to always offer support. Catholic conference directors have a lot on their plate, just like we do as school leaders and personnel. Being willing to help and lend a hand or give information or ideas is always a helpful thing if they need it. Some additional activities that are a little more complex, hosting school tours for legislators. You know, I always talk to school leaders about the fact this is just like hosting an admissions tour with a little bit of a twist. Make sure the legislator has the ability to walk through campus, talk with students, talk with teachers, and see why the education your students are receiving there is impacting them positively. It's always good to, at the end of a tour, to have a group of families, parents ready to talk with legislators to explain to them why your school is doing such good work for their children and how these programs are allowing them to have the opportunity to be enrolled in your Catholic school. Other ways you can kind of get involved, testifying during committee hearings, going down to the Capitol, talking about a bill that's up for consideration, why it's a good or bad thing for your students is key. Providing quantitative and qualitative data. When I talk about school choice with school leaders, I like to refer to school leaders as the glue of school choice, because truly we're one of the only individual groups that can impact all phases of advocacy, implementation, and data to show that the programs are working for our kids. When we don't bring our voices to the table, it becomes much harder to pass, expand, and defend these laws. So there are a lot of ways to get involved, but the best way to get involved is to talk with your peers who are already doing this work. We're very fortunate at this time to be joined by Tanya Santos, who is principal at Holy Name School in Nebraska. And Tanya was kind enough to sit down with us for a few minutes to talk about how she views advocacy, why she thinks it's important to make the time to advocate on behalf of her students, and how this is impacting her school and the families in Nebraska. So let's meet with Tanya at this point. So for this next part of the webinar, we're pleased to be joined by Tanya Santos, principal at Holy Name Catholic School in Omaha, Nebraska. Tanya is also a graduate of our inaugural group of school leader fellows in our AFC fellowship program. And Tanya, we're very, very happy to have you join us today. How are you?
I am blessed. I'm so happy to participate. Thanks for allowing me to do so.
Well, thanks for being here, and we'll get right into it. So first question I have for you is someone who has really engaged in advocacy for her school, for her students. Why do you think it's important for Catholic school leaders to be involved in advocacy?
Wow, that's such a great question. It is really important for Catholic school leaders to be involved in advocacy because it's not just enough for us to support children and their families academically and socially, emotionally, but we also have to think about our calling. Like, What did God call us to do? Why are we here? And how do we meet the needs of the whole child and their family? And I think the best way for us to do that is to make sure that we're addressing the bigger concerns of society by advocating and contributing to the preparing and supporting of children and families in order to allow us to have a better society as a whole. And not just for us who are here and present now, but for all of those that come after us. Society originally wasn't a really big part of education from the beginning of time, where teachers and educators and administrators were just in charge of preparing our students and families for the workforce and for life outside of school. And so it's always been a part, but now it's time for us to use that calling and step up and do it much more than what we just do in the brick and mortar of our walls. And the best way to do that is by advocating.
Fantastic. So what are some ways you engage in advocacy on behalf of your students in school?
Yeah, great question. So some ways that I engage in advocacy on behalf of my students, my families, and my school would, number one, creating a positive school culture that is inclusive, where everyone matters, everyone is loved, no matter what your socioeconomic status is, what your religion is. You don't have to be Catholic to come to one of our schools. So just creating a supportive, inclusive, positive culture is one thing. Also, when we're making decisions that always remind us of why we are here, because of the children. So I always ask myself, when I make a decision, is this what's best for children? Is this what's best for families? And then, is this what's best for staff? And not because I'm putting staff last, but because it allows me to keep the main thing, which is the children, and to make decisions that are best for them. And also making sure that I put on my lens from a student perspective. You know, how does this impact them? How does it make them feel? How is it what's best for them? And also being a good listener and listening to students, their opinion and their thoughts matter. And that's also how we build their strengths, so that we can teach them to advocate for themselves when they're no longer with us.
That's fantastic. So, you know, in the Catholic sector, we have our Catholic conference leaders who handle most policy and legislation on behalf of the bishop. How do you at Holy Name in Nebraska work with your Catholic conference to advocate on behalf of your kids?
Yeah, we work really well with our Catholic conference. They come to our administrative meetings sometimes. They're always sending emails and updates about updating and upcoming policies and legislation. And I think it's really important that we become proactive and be aware and knowledgeable of what they're sharing with us as it relates to current educational policies, not just at the state and federal level, but those bills and those legislative bills that are about to be introduced, those that are, in the process right now. And that requires us to be a lifelong learner. And stay up to date on those, but also just evidence-based practices, because that affects policy and it all affects what's best for children and families. So whenever they come out for meetings, whenever they send emails or updates, it's important that we make sure that we listen, that we engage, and that we ask questions. We encourage our children all the time. Ask questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question. There's no such thing as a bad question. So when I first got into policy and advocacy, I asked a lot of questions. And I had to also realize that it's okay to learn new things. It's important to always be learning. And asking those questions opened up the doors to building relationships with those at the Catholic conference, but also across the nation, and have opportunities where I could learn and grow as an advocate and stand up what's right for those children and those families that we support.
Absolutely. And I know the Catholic conference there, you said does a great job educating, but too, there's initiative on your part, right? Like to say,
Yes.
hey, I'm here, let me help and let me be part of that, which is critical too for us as school leaders.
Absolutely.
So, what advice would you give another principal who may just be starting their advocacy journey and looking to get started? So, if you take yourself back to when you started, what would you tell Tanya from that point right now, if you could, to help them get going?
I have to be 100% honest. I'm always transparent. That could be a good thing and a bad thing, but I'm saying God's calling me to be transparent and be a good thing. At first, when the friends from the Catholic conference would come to meetings and encourage us to be engaged, I was like, oh gosh, this is just another thing. Like, I have this going on with new curriculum. I have this going on with professional development. I have an upset parent in a meeting here. So I had, like, those first 2 years of me being a Catholic school principal, I did not engage. I did not answer questions. I didn't ask questions. I might read the emails and that was it. But there was a moment where I just was being really prayerful and I was like, God, I feel like you're calling me to do a little bit more, but I don't know what that is. So give me knowledge, give me discernment, give me wisdom about what that is. And right after I said that prayer, Jeremy came to speak at one of our admin meetings. And I was like, okay, I got to ask this question. God's pushing me. So give yourself grace, give yourself the ability to say, you know what, we're always going to have a to-do list. It's for the rest of our life. It's never going to always go away. We're going to add things, we're going to take things off. But again, if you're making decisions about what's best for children, then put that as a priority, advocating for them, using your voice. And as you do that, you'll see everything else will fall in place. So that would be my advice. Go ahead, ask questions, jump in. You will notice that when you do that, everything else, God allows everything else to fall in place. And the policy and the advocation all relates to what you're doing in the school building. So it all makes sense. It all ties together.
It does. And I always invite transparency because, it is one more thing. And one of the things I would compliment from what you said, from my own experiences is, even when you were too busy, you were taking the time to educate yourself, which is critical, right? Because at least you understand what's going on. And then it allows you maybe to do a little bit more as you get more comfortable. We all know from being new principals, everything's flying around and moving fast and your first year's gone in an instant. But building from that is a fantastic recommendation, I think.
Well, and you just made me think about something is I didn't really realize it until you said it, but even just reading the emails, right? So if you start with reading the emails and then the next time you're at a meeting, you're like, okay, that was a really good email. This bill looks important. How do I share that? Maybe just put a little blast on your school Twitter or on your Facebook page. It takes 30 seconds to forward something from the Catholic School Conference. And then maybe the next year you're sending an email out. So just maybe baby step it because every step matters, whether we think about it or not. And Bruce just helped me to acknowledge that myself. So whether it's reading something to sharing something to speaking, it just baby yourself up there and baby step it, I should say. And you'll notice that before long, it just kind of becomes a natural part of who you are and what you do.
Definitely. So let me finish with this here. Obviously, this webinar has been about school choice in general and the progress we made during this legislative session and growth of programs and opportunities for families. Nebraska is working on getting their first school choice program passed, and hopefully that's going to get across the finish line. Families will be served. Could you talk a little bit just about your experience in helping advocate for school choice in Nebraska and what this would mean for families and students in your state, and why you continue to be an advocate for these opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the last couple of years, there have been some bills that were introduced to support children with special needs in the Catholic school setting because we don't always get a lot of funding. Most of that funding comes from the federal government and then it goes to the public schools and we get a disbursement of that here in Nebraska. So I started out with just like some public school special education legislations where I became knowledgeable. I read the information and then I was given an opportunity to testify. And going through the fellowship, I actually got to get some training on that. But even if you don't participate in the fellowship, the Catholic conferences are so good at helping you first maybe write a testimony, and then you can just read it while you're there. They give you tips and strategies and practice with you. And with special education, it was not just professional as a principal, but also personal because I do have a child with an IEP. So starting with something that has a connection to your heart and your own experience makes it so much easier. But then also just continuing to see what other ways. So now we have the opportunity for LB 753 to be passed here in the state of Nebraska, which would be an opportunity tax credit that would allow donations to be given to approved scholarship granting organizations that would provide scholarships for our low-income families. And again, making decisions, what's best for children. We know low-income students across our nation need the ability to have a choice, an education, and an education that is the right fit for them. Not everyone is going to excel in a public school setting, just like not everyone goes to college. God has created us with a purpose that only we can serve. And so I took that opportunity of, okay, not just my kids in my building, but there are low income families across this state. We need to provide them an opportunity to choose the school that is right for them. And their ability to pay should not, or to afford it should not be what prevents them from going and having that education. So again, reading the emails, listening to conversations and webinars, becoming familiar with how the law or the legislation policy was first introduced and how it's kind of changed along the way. And then taking opportunities to work with the Catholic School Conference to actually, I spoke with the senator and actually the governor. Our new governor is a big fan of this school choice, which is great, which has really helped us to kind of move forward and him making a priority. And then taking the opportunities with the Catholic School Conference to present at a luncheon with the governor and share the top 10 reasons why we should have school choice in Nebraska. And then just that one opportunity allowed my students to come up and go to the Capitol and to see how the governor does his speech when he first takes his job. And they got to be called out and celebrated and see themselves on TV. And so just following through with that, and wherever I go, whether it's Walmart, Target, the dollar store, the gas station, just, if I hear someone having a conversation of, yeah, my child's school isn't the right fit for them. And then I'd be like, oh, hey, have you heard about this bill? I have a 30-second elevator speech. I'd be happy to send you some information about that. Also, I send my parents emails now. So just updating them through a quick blast email to everybody about, hey, this is what's coming up. Those that are becoming more involved, inviting them to participate in like the advertisements and doing testimonies is one way that we've helped it to happen. So this is really huge. We're really excited. We're almost there. I'm declaring and decreeing in Jesus's name that our kids in the state of Nebraska are going to have an opportunity, regardless of their economic status, to get an education that is the best fit for them because they deserve it and they're worth it.
Well, Tanya, your kids, your school in the state of Nebraska is lucky to have you there, working and doing all that you do. Thank you for coming on with us and kind of giving some insights from someone doing the work currently, sitting in the chair, and making the time to benefit their students and their school through advocacy. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. And thank you all. I encourage you to advocate, even if it's just a little baby step, one thing at a time. Your voice matters, and you're there for a purpose. So pray about it, see what you can do to help kids in your state and in our nation. I appreciate all your hard work. You're coming up probably to the end of the year. And if not, starting a new year or summer school or whatever time you get an opportunity to be present, pray. Thank you for your hard work and dedication. It does not go unnoticed. God bless you all.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you.
So it's always great to hear from our school leaders who are a member of our school leader fellowship, especially who are doing this work on the ground. It's easiest always to learn from our peers, to see what's worked for them, what needs to be improved, and maybe find our own ways to get engaged in the process as we go. So in addition to the information you've gotten today, if you want more information on how to be involved in school choice advocacy and advocacy in general, we have a couple opportunities we'd like to extend to our NCAA partners. NCAA was kind enough to publish a book a couple months ago, From the Schoolhouse to the State House, which is basically a user's manual for how to get involved in school choice advocacy. The book is fairly short. It doesn't take long to get through, give some tips and kind of thought processes on advocacy, how to engage your staff, your students, your families, to give them tools to empower themselves to go out and make a difference in having these opportunities and see them expand. At AFC, we also have our School Leader Fellowship, which is an 8-month all expense paid program that teaches school leaders how to become better advocates for school choice opportunities for their students. Our next cohort will launch in October of 2023. If you have any interest in more information on that, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at my email address, bhermy@federationforchildren.org. Finally, AFC has a special project to build national support for Catholic schools and increase educational opportunities for students who would like a Catholic education. We call it Go Teach, and we'll have a video coming out in the next month or so that basically puts focus on the good work Catholic schools are doing, and we'd like to share that video with you at this time.
Pope Francis once said this: educating is an act of love. It's like giving life. Yeah, so 2003, we came over to the States from Egypt, started in South Sudan.
These scholarships have made it for families to have a choice that they would never have even thought about in the past, because they would have thought that a private school, a Catholic school, was unattainable.
So we were looking for other options. We found Catholic schools, and it's the best decision we've ever made.
I love going to Catholic school. I feel like I really get an amazing learning opportunity going here.
St. John Paul II said, as the family goes, so goes the world.
In Sudan, our people say, education is a weapon. People can respect you if you are well educated.
So Ryan and Shaka, thank you for joining us today on our webinar. For those of you who want more information, please don't hesitate to reach out to us about anything school choice related. We at AFC value our partnership with NCEA and continue to support Catholic schools nationwide in the quest for more opportunities for families to utilize school choice to choose Catholic education for their children. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day.